You're watching Eagle News America. I'm Ace Ramirez coming to you from Washington. It's Wednesday, March 3, 2021. We have updates from our correspondents across North and Central America. Liza Gonzalez Manglikmot in Washington reports about U.S. and Mexico discussing cooperation on migration, COVID-19 response and recovery, and climate change. Thomas Likeness in Edmonton, Alberta.
Health workers worldwide facing violence, much of it related to the pandemic.
Mila Simbulan in Swarthmore, Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania will use the newly released Johnson & Johnson single-dose COVID-19 vaccine for teachers and staff.
Abigail Dumlao in Rochester updates us on the New York mass vaccination sites to operate 24/7 and to begin administering the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine. May Ann Manzano-Gorzon in Sicklerville, New Jersey.
New Jersey's wedding receptions to operate at increased capacity.
Rani Bayuga in Parisburg, Ohio.
Ohio heads to phase 2. Continue vaccination using Johnson & Johnson jab.
Eli Austria in Pasadena, California.
LA Metro's first of 2 TBMs in process to complete the first section of its Purple D-Line extension transit project.
Jane Rahel in Houston reports about Texas local officials reacting to Governor Abbott's lifting the state's mask mandate and allowing businesses to operate with 100% occupancy. May Davila in Ciudad de Panama tells us about Panama, Google, and Apple's collaboration on a COVID contact exposure notification platform. Plus, if time permits, for our roundtable discussion, March is Women History Month. Let's recognize and celebrate accomplished and visionary women we admire. Our coverage begins now. UNICEF has installed 168 empty desks outside the United Nations headquarters in New York City. Each represents 1 million children whose schools have been entirely closed for almost a year due to COVID-19 lockdowns. This pandemic classroom draws attention to the profound impact of keeping students out of school and calls on world leaders to reopen schools as soon as possible. UNICEF's Global Chief of Education, Robert Jenkins, says the situation is alarming.
For me, it is very disturbing, just the sheer scale, and this representing 168 deaths, 168 million children. It's hard to get your kind of head around these kind of numbers, but when you see the sheer number of desks, it gives you some sense of just how many children have been affected.
Jenkins says the scale of the crisis needs crucial action.
At the height of the crisis, the height of the disruption of the pandemic, we had 1.6 billion children with their schooling affected. That's over 92% of the global student body. These are numbers that would have been unthinkable prior to this pandemic. So the scale of this crisis was unprecedented, but also now the time that it has taken, a year long, as represented by these desks, these empty desks. This is, we're in new territory. Once again, just demands urgent action.
Jenkins, calling on schools worldwide to not delay reopening, says what's more bothersome is how prolonged school closures have increased incidents of teenage pregnancies and sexual-based violence.
What we've learned from such prolonged school closures has a profound impact, particularly on vulnerable and marginalized children. So we're calling for all governments to open schools now. Schools should be the first to open during the reopening process, to take all actions to do so safely, but to also provide comprehensive support as children re-enter the schools. We have seen from previous pandemics like the Ebola crisis in West Africa, prolonged school closures increased significantly. For example, a significant increase in percentage of teenage pregnancies, in incidents of sexual-based violence.
Meanwhile, millions of coronavirus shots from the global COVAX scheme have arrived in Nigeria, Angola, and Kenya as African countries ramp up their vaccine rollouts. Richer countries have surged ahead with vaccinations, but many poorer countries are still awaiting deliveries, prompting the World Health Organization, or WHO, to warn that the crisis cannot end unless everyone can inoculate their populations. The COVAX facility, run by the WHO along with health NGOs, is aiming to supply vaccines to dozens of countries in the first 100 days of 2021 and 2 billion doses by the end of the year. While the continent's most populous country, Nigeria, received almost 4 million jabs on Tuesday, Angola received more than 600,000 doses, and the Democratic Republic of Congo was scheduled to get a consignment later, following recent deliveries to Ghana and Ivory Coast. Kenya received its first shipment of just over 1 million COVAX-funded AstraZeneca Oxford shots early Wednesday. However, there are still critical hurdles for the scheme's rollout in vast African countries with sketchy infrastructure and an array of security challenges. In Angola, where some healthcare workers were vaccinated shortly after the doses were offloaded, the WHO's Jamila Cabral said the arrival of vaccines brought a stronger hope to save lives, but warned that everyone needed to continue respecting COVID restrictions to beat the pandemic. In Mexico, the coronavirus pandemic closed their school, but it also thrust a group of disadvantaged Mexican children living next to a giant garbage dump into the digital world. A project teaching the students how to use computers and the internet has given them hope of a life far from the trash mountain where their parents work recycling waste. In a makeshift classroom in an unfinished house, an NGO called Utopia teaches the students reading, writing, and math, as well as how to send files in the PDF format. The smell of garbage wafts over from the nearby dump. Mexico, a country of 126 million people, has registered more than 186,000 known coronavirus deaths, the world's third highest toll. After school shut, the NGO added digital skills to its educational plan so that the students in the disadvantaged community could continue their studies remotely. NGO's founder, Jesus Villalobos, says before the crisis struck, it was more important to teach the children to read than to use Word. The impoverished community is located in one of the most populated and violent municipalities in the country. In other news, President Joe Biden and Mexican President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, in a virtual summit, talked about issues affecting both countries and how they plan to move forward addressing the matters together. In Washington, ABC's Eliza Gonzalez Manglikmot files this report.
During a virtual bilateral meeting, President Joe Biden and President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador of Mexico discussed the importance of cooperation between the two countries when it comes to migration, COVID-19 response and recovery, and climate change.
All the elements of my administration.
Biden and Lopez Obrador recognized the economic and cultural contributions of migrants to both the U.S. and Mexico. Both committed to the dignity of migrants by agreeing to address the root causes of regional migration, improve migration management, and develop legal pathways to migration. On COVID-19 response and recovery, Biden and Lopez Obrador agreed to enhance public health capabilities, data sharing, and border policies development. They recognize the need to strengthen supply chain resilience and security by starting the high-level economic dialogue. Looking ahead to this year's Climate Leaders Summit on April 22, hosted by the U.S., both leaders underscored the benefits of addressing short-lived pollutants and the need to promote energy efficiency. President Biden says the U.S. and Mexico are safer when cooperating on how to address issues that especially affect the two countries. Take a look.
The United States and Mexico are stronger when we stand together. There's a long and complicated history between our nations that haven't always been perfect neighbors with one another, but we have seen over and over again the power and the purpose when we cooperate, and we're safer when we work together, whether it's addressing the challenges of our shared border for getting this pandemic under control.
The sun is up today here in the nation's capital. It is 52 degrees Fahrenheit or 11 degrees Celsius. In Washington, Eliza Gonzalez, Manglik Mott, Eagle News. Will live in interesting times.
Thank you, Eliza. President Joe Biden says he is calling on all U.S. states and the District of Columbia to ensure that all education workers receive at least the first shot of a COVID-19 vaccine by the end of the month. Let's take a look.
Let's treat in-person learning like an essential service that it is. And that means getting essential workers who provide that service, educators, school staff, child care workers, get them vaccinated immediately. They're essential workers. My challenge to all states, territories, and the District of Columbia is this. We want every educator, school staff member, child care worker to receive at least one shot by the end of the month of March.
President Biden expresses concern over the increasing mental health issues among young people caused partly by isolation.
Right now, an entire generation of young people is on the brink of being set back a year or more in their learning. You can ask millions of parents, they understand. We're already seeing rising mental health concerns due in part to isolation.
Biden says he is hopeful that sooner than later, things will return to how they were before.
When do I think things will get back to normal? I've been cautioned not to give an answer to that because we don't know for sure. But my hope is by this time next year, we're going to be back to normal, and before that, my hope. But again, it depends upon if people continue to be smart and understand that we still can have significant losses.
For today's COVID-19 numbers, according to the Coronavirus Resource Center of Johns Hopkins University in Medicine, as of 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Wednesday, March 3rd, the number of cases of COVID-19 reported worldwide is now more than 114,882,000. Top three on the list of countries with recorded cases: U.S. number 1 with more than 28.7 million, India coming next with more than 11.1, and Brazil trailing by 10.6 million. To date, more than 2,551,000 have succumbed to this virus. The U.S. leads the countries with the most number of COVID-19 related deaths with more than 516,000. Brazil is next with more than 257,000, and Mexico more than 187,000. When we come back, updates from Edmonton, Alberta, Pennsylvania, and New York. This is Eagle News America. Stay with us.
Factual.
We have to defeat the virus everywhere.
Timely information. Balanced, not only in the country, but also abroad.
I'm certain of one thing.
Interviews that people need to know. Watch Aguila Pilipinas. A one-hour newscast of reports coming from regional hubs in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Know the important updates in Asia in ASEAN in Focus. Track the latest stories in the provinces in Aguila Provincia. Tune into Mata ng Agila, the evening primetime news program of Net25. Balanced and objective, Mata ng Agila covers national and international issues, tackles news on business, health, science, and technology, entertainment, sports and human interest features, and current events. And Eagle News International delivers the latest global reports, impartial, accessible, and up-to-date. It brings to fore EBC's rich international scope and access to valuable information streams.
Well, thank you to thank our health outdoor attack.
Catch these programs on Net25. You can also watch our news programs through eaglenews.ph and Eagle News Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Eagle News America, I'm Ace Ramirez in Washington. Health workers around the globe are being harassed and attacked for fear that they are more likely to spread the coronavirus. EBC's Thomas Likeness tells us about these unfortunate incidents. Thomas.
Thank you, Ace. You're right. Providing health care for people, well, it's a dangerous job at the best of times. You know, you've got dangers of infection, accidentally getting jabbed by a sharp, injuries related to giving treatment to people. That's just the regular dangers of the job. What I'm talking about tonight is different. Worldwide, there have been scores of incidents where healthcare workers are assaulted, they're harassed, they're even killed because of what they do. An organization called Safeguarding Healthcare and Conflict Coalition tracks this sort of stuff. It's produced an interactive map. You can see it up there on the screen. And of the nearly 1,200 incidents it documented around the world last year, 412 of them, that's nearly that is 1/3, were related to the pandemic. Now you say worldwide, 1,200 incidents, that's not so bad in the scheme of things. But remember this, most incidents go unreported. The pandemic-related attacks include things like targeting healthcare workers on their way home from clinics, violent responses to masking requirements or social distancing or other public health restrictions. In some countries, people have even set fires to COVID-19 testing facilities. And in some countries, healthcare workers have not been allowed to return to their rented accommodation. Why? Because of fears that they will be spreading the virus at home. The most frequent trigger for violence was public health restrictions. So who is behind this? Who is making all of these attacks? Is it the conspiracy theorists? You know, the organized groups who say the pandemic is a hoax, the restrictions should be abolished? Is it them? Not at all. The coalition says 83% of the violence was carried out by civilians. You know, people like your next door neighbor, local community members, COVID-19 patients, and family members of patients. The coalition says the incidents it highlighted are likely only a fraction of what took place. It says very few attacks on healthcare workers are publicly reported by the media. They're not documented by non-governmental organizations very often and seldom acknowledged by governments. And it's called on governments to act immediately to safeguard healthcare workers. I tip my hat now to all of you working in this very dangerous profession. You don't need this added stress. In Edmonton, Canada, Thomas I. Likeness, Eagle News. We live in interesting times. Back to you, Ace.
Thomas, thank you. Against healthcare workers, I don't understand why.
Well, you know, we saw it at the beginning of the pandemic, Ace. They were heroes until they wanted to take the same elevator as you, and then it was, would you mind getting the next one? You know?
Right.
It's been around for a long time.
How prevalent is violence against these healthcare workers in North America?
Well, the coalition reported 14 incidents of violence or threats of violence in the U.S. that resulted in 7 workers being injured. But in the U.S., it appears to be mostly harassment of workers. A lot of it just goes unreported. People refusing to have workers of Asian descent, for example, providing treatment to them, refusing to rent to healthcare workers or serve them in businesses or restaurants, that sort of thing. And like I said, most of that goes unreported. Up here in Canada, a couple of reported incidents of violence, but there's a whole lot more than that under the radar. The hot spot for this problem is Mexico, where 67 severe incidents were reported, 7 healthcare workers killed in that country, 11 injured, 29 workers kidnapped, as well as 3 health facilities being vandalized. And again, I stress a lot of these incidents are simply not reported, so the coalition is providing what it calls with its interactive map, a minimal estimate of the danger. Ace?
The big question is, what prompts these people to attack?
Well, the coalition and its members studied this issue quite extensively, and they say there are 5 major motives that people have. People have destroyed clinics and quarantine centers because they object to them being used to treat COVID patients or accommodate people awaiting COVID test results. You know, it just they'll end up contaminating other people. That's their objection there. They also object to medical measures such as testing, changes in funeral regulations, burial locations for COVID-19 victims that offend some people culturally. A third motive, objections to public health restrictions. And we've seen a whole lot of that. We see that in our communities with these massive protests. People don't want to wear masks. They don't want to close down their businesses, that sort of thing. Some healthcare workers found themselves being arrested or assaulted by security forces. Why? Because they voiced concerns about their work. They were punished or fired for speaking out about the lack of PPE or criticizing government responses to the pandemic. And some were attacked on their way to and from work. And this is sad. This is by people who are afraid that healthcare workers will spread the infection in their communities. But when they get sick, who's the first they call on?
Exactly. Fear, anxiety, isolation, whatever is causing it, it's still...
And I think a lot of it is fed, and some other people have said that a lot of this is fed by some of the myths, the misinformation you find up on social media.
Thank you so much, Thomas Likeness, Edmonton, Alberta.
Thank you, Ace.
Teachers and school employees in Pennsylvania are next in line to receive the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine. In Swarthmore, Bureau Chief Mila Simbulan has the story. Mila.
Hi, Ace. That's right. As part of the priority to safely and quickly get more students back in the classroom, Governor Tom Wolf and the COVID-19 Vaccine Task Force today announced that Pennsylvania will use the Johnson & Johnson or Janssen single-dose COVID-19 vaccine for pre-K-12 teachers and other school staff. Here's Governor Tom Wolf to tell us more. Take a look.
So in consultation with the Department of Health, Pennsylvania Department of Health, and the Pennsylvania Department of Education, the task force, we have all decided to recommend that this Johnson & Johnson stream go to our teachers and school employees, public and private. That's everybody, teachers, bus drivers, staff, cafeteria staff, janitors, management, so that we can get our children back to in-person classrooms as quickly as possible. With Johnson & Johnson as a one-dose vaccine, this actually is an advantage in that we can do this more quickly than we can with a two-dose vaccine.
The Food and Drug Administration and Centers for Disease Control and Prevention last weekend authorized the Johnson & Johnson vaccine for emergency use. Pennsylvania will receive 94,600 doses this week. To quickly get the vaccine into educators' arms, the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency and the Departments of Education and Health are partnering with the 28 intermediate units, or IUs, to establish vaccine sites. The Pennsylvania National Guard and the AMI Expeditionary Healthcare will administer the vaccine. Philadelphia operates its own separate vaccine distribution. The vaccination of educators is separate from the ongoing Phase 1A vaccine rollout, which continues at an accelerated pace. Each IU region will have at least one vaccination location, with most locations starting vaccinations between March 10 and 13. Eligible school staff will receive information about vaccine locations and registration instructions. The vaccine is voluntary. The initial priority is vaccinating school staff that have regular and sustained in-person contact with students during the regular school day, including teachers and staff providing pre-K and elementary instruction, special education, English learners, and associated support because younger children are more susceptible to learning loss and their families are more likely to have childcare challenges. The administration is also working through the Retail Pharmacy Partnership to ensure All early childhood education workers, including those not associated with an IU, have access to the vaccine, including childcare workers providing an essential service to working families across the Commonwealth. For our weather is here in Swarthmore, we have a warmer weather today. It's 45 degrees Fahrenheit or 7 degrees Celsius with clear skies. In Swarthmore, Pennsylvania, Myla Simbulan, Eagle News, we live in interesting times. Back to you, Ace.
Thank you, Myla. Which pre-K school staff members, pre-K to 12th grade, right? Which of these school staff members are eligible to receive the J&J COVID-19 vaccine?
So it's all pre-K to 12 public and non-public school staff will have an opportunity to be vaccinated under this initiative. School staff or any pre-K to 12 school employees, contractors, or independent consultants that, typically interact with students in a school setting during their regular school day, including teachers, classroom support staff, even early childhood education professionals that's employed by the school entity, school administrators, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, school nurses, speech and occupational therapists, custodians, and other school employees. Ace?
There's always been a question, is it mandatory? A lot of people are asking, are they required to be vaccinated? And when can they start receiving vaccination?
So vaccination is not mandatory. It's up to you if you want to be vaccinated. And the regional vaccination sites are expected to begin operations between March 10 to 13. So it's really soon. Ace?
Thank you so much, Myla Simbulan, Swarthmore, Pennsylvania. Mass vaccination sites in the state of New York are to operate all day, every day, as they begin to administer the Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccine. In Rochester, Eagle News correspondent Abigail Dumblao reports.
Governor Andrew Cuomo announced New York State is launching a new pilot program to begin administering the Johnson & Johnson single-dose vaccine to eligible New Yorkers during the overnight hours at the Yankee Stadium Javits Center and New York State Fair mass vaccination sites. Following a discussion with the White House COVID-19 Task Force, New York is taking measures to distribute the state's allocation of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine as quickly as possible. As states have been informed, there will be a lag in the following week's allocation. As part of this effort, thousands of new appointments will be made available at each of the 3 sites in the coming days. Counties, pharmacies, and federally qualified health centers will also be receiving Johnson & Johnson allocations. New York expects to receive approximately 164,800 doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine this week as the federal supply of this new vaccine increases. These efforts will be adapted and expanded to other sites throughout the state. Governor Cuomo said the White House has made great progress securing additional Johnson & Johnson vaccines, and New York State will receive a large initial allocation of them to be administered over the next week. This pilot plan will maximize the initial doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and get as many shots in arms as possible. To ensure an efficient and streamlined administration of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, these doses will be administered separately from the Pfizer vaccine at these sites. While the Pfizer vaccine requires 2 doses, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine only requires 1. In Rochester, New York, Abigail Dumblao, Eagle News. We live in interesting time. Back to you.
States from New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and California. Eagle News America will return shortly.
The Filipino is a resilient race. We have weathered unimaginable calamities. But as a nation, we always rise and face new challenges, including the COVID-19 crisis. This week, we will talk about ways to minimize the risks posed to our lives and livelihood during disasters.
We need to understand hazards and risks, whether it be personally, our businesses, our community, our way of living, and even including our mindset. It helps us to go on the second leg, which is to act.
Ms. Maria Teresa Nina Abogado, Senior Manager for Programs and Partnerships of Oxfam Philippines, will share disaster preparedness and where to get access to financial resources and the ability to predict the onset of major and disruptive events in this week's episode of Open for Business.
Bagong batch of contenders ang muling magtatagisan sa kantahan ngayong Sabado. Ibig sabihin yan, new batch of talents din ang ating masasaksihan. This is Tagisan ng Galing Part 2, Singing Edition.
It's time to take one step further and face the impossible. Time to search the unknown and fight for the truth. Time to overcome boundaries and connect the world. It's time for DW News.
Hey there, Arnie Aquino here at Hatley Castle, one of the filming locations for the X-Men series. Don't forget to tune in to Digital Nest only on Net25.
Eagle News America, I'm Ace Ramirez in Washington. Those of you planning a wedding in New Jersey, Governor Phil Murphy just allowed reception venues to operate at an increased capacity. And Sickler Vome and Manzano Gorzon has the details.
Thank you, Ace. Governor Phil Murphy today signed Executive Order number 228, allowing indoor wedding receptions to operate at 35% capacity of the room in which they are held, and outdoor wedding receptions to permit up to 150 individuals. Both capacity limits are exclusive of venue staff. Receptions will be required to follow indoor and outdoor dining guidance, which requires that people eat and drink while seated and wear face coverings at all other times. Take a look.
And today I will be signing an executive order allowing wedding receptions to proceed at 35% of a venue's indoor capacity, up to 150 persons, and up to 150 people, by the way, outdoors. Indoor receptions must abide by our indoor dining guidance, which requires that people eat and drink while they're seated and wear face coverings at all other times. However, because we know these events take time to plan and we see things slowly moving in the right direction, we can safely take this step. As we slowly recover, we want people to be able to celebrate the good things. Before we move off of this takes effect this Friday at 6 a.m. And when you look at summer camps and wedding receptions, they have one thing very much in common. They take months to plan. So I would say on behalf of Judy and Eddie, we're not declaring victory here as it relates to coronavirus. Our numbers have come down, but they're sort of in a zone right now. But we do believe we're going to get there, particularly when you add the proliferation of the vaccine distribution beginning really more so next month than this month. We'll come back to that in a minute.
Additionally, Governor Murphy today indicated that overnight camps will be permitted to resume operations for the summer season. The Governor and the Department of Health will issue additional guidance regarding the application process and the applicable health and safety protocols in the coming weeks. And for New Jersey's latest COVID numbers, the Department of Health has reported another 2,957 new positive cases today, bringing our statewide total to 710,046. Sadly, we are also reporting 63 new confirmed deaths, pushing the total to 21,052 fatalities. But on the brighter side, the latest total of COVID-19 vaccination already administered here in New Jersey is now 2,190,179. And for a quick weather update, Ace, it's currently 9:14 in the evening here in New Jersey, and it's currently clear. It is 39 degrees Fahrenheit or 4 degrees Celsius. In Sicklerville, New Jersey, May and Manzano Garzon, Eagle News, we live in interesting times. Back to you, Ace.
Thank you, Mayan. With all these increased capacity limits for indoor events, wedding reception venues, are you thinking of getting married again? Or do you see the gymnasiums, the sports facilities opening soon?
Well, Ace, many are asking about that question. But basing it from the reason why state officials are opening up wedding receptions and summer camps, I don't think gyms will have an increased capacity anytime soon, because just like what the governor said, weddings and summer camps, Ace, take months of planning, whereas gyms are entirely under a different category. Ace?
Thank you so much, Mayan. Sicklerville, New Jersey. The state of Ohio is heading to phase 2 as it continues inoculation program, now using the Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccine. In Pearisburg, Randy Bayuga joins us this evening with the details. Randy.
Thank you, Ace. The first Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccine was administered in the U.S. yesterday at The Ohio State University. 86-year-old Barbara Schmallenberger says, "I wanted this shot and I didn't want to settle for anything else." Ohio will receive a total of 483,390 doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. 96,100 arrived this week. Joseph Castaldo, MD of Ohio Health, says that this will mean more shots in the arms to get us closer to community immunity. Ohio is now starting phase 1C vaccination. People with type 1 diabetes, pregnant, bone marrow transplant recipients, living with ALS, and those working in the child care services, funeral services, law enforcement, and correction officers are included in phase 1C. Phase 1C will include approximately 246,000 Ohioans. Governor Mike DeWine also announced the start of phase 2 to start tomorrow to inoculate people who are age 60 and older. This will target another 695,000 eligible Ohioans. The state continues to educate Ohioans on the efficacy of the vaccine. It completed its virtual town halls meetings yesterday with rural Ohioans. 2 public orders were signed and put into effect yesterday. Director of the Department of Health, Stephanie McLeod, implemented 2 public health orders to limit and or prohibit mass gatherings in the state. This will expire when the Ohio Public Health orders it to rescind the orders. And the Department of Health will internal sports venues will hold a maximum of 25% of fixed seated capacity. External sports venues will hold approximately 30% of fixed seated capacity. Any indoor entertainment is limited to 25% of fixed seated capacity, and outdoor entertainments will be to 30% fixed seated capacity. Exceptions: religious gatherings, weddings, wedding receptions, funeral repasts, and proms. Places that serve food must comply with previously signed health orders. Banquet centers are no longer limited to 300 people, provided they comply with the health orders. Ohio is ranked number 1 for state economic development projects per capita. Governor Mike DeWine states, Ohio continues to attract new corporate facilities and businesses to invest here. In Ohio, we have strong business community that will work alongside with new companies who are looking to invest and utilize our skilled workforce. As of yesterday, another 34,521 Ohioans were vaccinated. A total of 1,759,495 and 495,000 were vaccinated in total. There are now 972,605 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Ohio. 50,613 were hospitalized, and the total deaths at 16,715. And there are presumed recovered at 916,592. Perrysburg, Ohio, Ronnie Bayuga, Eagle News. We live in interesting times. Back to you, Ace.
Thank you, Randy. It sounds like Ohio is a tad late in reopening. While New Jersey was discussing about 100% reopening, you're talking about 20, 30%. What's happening?
Oh, we are actually wide open. It's just that these facilities, sports venues, and some restaurants, banquet centers were limited still to 25% or of capacity, and then some of them were also there was also a curfew in place a few weeks ago, and that was removed when the number of cases dropped in Ohio. But we continue to move forward, and for the most part, everything is wide open. Schools are back, basically back in-person learning 5 days a week almost.
Okay, all right, that's great. Have you received your vaccine?
Not yet. I'm waiting for phase 2.
Excited about the Johnson & Johnson jab?
I would take either that or continue with the Pfizer.
All right.
Those would be interesting.
Okay, good to know. Thank you so much,
Thank
Randy.
you.
Perrysburg, Ohio. In Los Angeles, Eagle News correspondent Eli Austria updates us on the progress of the city's Purple D-Line Extension Transit Project. Eli.
Thank you, Ace. Los Angeles Metro's first of 2 tunnel boring machines, or TBMs, breaks through to the Wilshire and La Cienega subway station, the last part of the first section of the Purple D-Line Extension Transit Project. This first TBM is named Elsie, and the second is called Suyun. They each weigh 1,000 tons, are 400 feet in length, and described as pressurized, closed-face machines, minimizing ground settlement during excavation. The 2 twin TBMs were originally placed in the ground in October of 2008 at the Wilshire and La Brea subway station. Since that time, both machines have tunneled about 60 feet per day, working 5 days during the week and 20 hours each day. This is a historical milestone for the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation, or we call it LA Metro, as Section 1 of this tunneling project is about 70% complete. Section 1 is aimed to be fully done by 2023, and upon completion of this first section, the TBMs will have excavated almost 500,000 cubic yards of earth, which, fun fact, is like packing 2.3 million bathtubs with soil. So this $9.3 billion Metro Purple D-Line Extension Transit Project will construct a 9-mile underground subway, extending the Metro Purple D-Line from Koreatown all the way to Westwood. It will be constructed in 3 sections, and the second section is set to be completed in 2025, while the third and final section is scheduled to be completed in 2027. In Pasadena, California, Eli Austria, Eagle News, we live in interesting times. Back to you, Ace.
Eli, what is the vision of the city and the county officials in constructing this kind of project for the future transportation system?
Right, so Ace, with a population of over 10 million, I'm sure Los Angeles is well known for its heavily congested freeways and streets, especially in considering the unhealthy air pollution. So as a way to kind of remedy that, city and county officials are looking to introduce a new way of transportation and mobility. So in the future, we can improve the residents' quality of life preserve the natural environment, and also move the economy. Ace?
Great. All right. Thank you so much, Eli. Pasadena, California. Give my regards to Elsie and Soyoung. Up next, an update from Ciudad de Panama and tonight's roundtable about Women History Month. Eagle News America will be right back.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced. Eagle News, because we live in interesting times.
Bakit po ayaw ni Papa di mag-celebrate ng birthday niya?
Hindi mo kailangan yun.
Ang dami pa lang hindi nagawa si Papa para sa birthday niya. Alam mo, pwede pa natin ang gawa ng paraan para matupad lahat ng mga birthday bucket list ni Papa D. Alam ko na.
Ha? It's no! Oh, left, left! Oh! Yeah, Manuel! Oh, yeah!
Happy birthday, Papa D!
Kumanta, sumaya tayong lahat. Kaya saya.
Eagle News America, I'm Ace Ramirez in Washington. Panama, Apple, and Google collaborate on developing and making available a COVID-19 contact exposure notification platform. In Ciudad de Panama, Eagle News correspondent May Davila tells us more.
Panama collaborates with the companies Google and Apple to make available a contact exposure notification platform. This is to provide support to Panamanians and foreigners in the Republic of Panama. This will help them find out in a timely manner if they have been exposed to a person positive for COVID-19. Knowing so, they can take the necessary steps to avoid complications according to protocols already established by the Ministerio de Salud. Protégete Panama, Panama's notification system of exposure to COVID-19, is a new voluntary service to help stop the spread of COVID-19. This also aids in better control of the framework of commercial reopening. The activation of the express exposure notifications from Apple and Google allows iOS users to activate the functionality directly from their operating system. They go to the Settings or Configuration section of Exposure Notifications and activate the notification. For Android users, it is necessary to download the app from the Google Play Store as Protégete Panama. The Protégete Panama system can quickly notify a person with the app if there is a probability of having been exposed to COVID-19. Being informed about the possible exposure allows one to reduce the risk of spreading the virus to his or her family, friends, neighbors, and the rest of the community. Once the system is activated, whenever the person who has this app comes 2 meters from another person with the app, For a minimum of 10 minutes, both their phones will exchange secure and anonymous keys via Bluetooth. If another user, he or she was close to, tests positive for COVID-19, they can notify the person through the application anonymously. The system will send a notification to his or her phone and to that of any other person that the notifying user may have been exposed, provided they are also users of the application. If the person tests positive, the app easily and anonymously notifies others to help slow the spread of COVID-19. The government assures that the keys do not store, record, or exchange personal information, nor do they exchange phone numbers, location, or use of GPS. The keys will be the only identification in any case a person tests positive, while all contacts will be notified. Desde Ciudad de Panama, May Davila, Eagle News, vivimos en tiempos interesantes.
Thank you, May Davila. March is Women's History Month in the United States. Part of the celebration is to honor women who have contributed to the nation's history. These include those who, in this time of global crisis, are braving the virus threat in the name of their duties as frontliners, essential workers, and first responders. Tonight, let's ask our team who they'd like to recognize as accomplished and visionary women of our time. Thomas, let's start with you. Who's your notable woman?
Well, I want to tell you the story of an actress. That's right, an actress back in the 1930s and 40s. Her name was Hedy Lamarr, very popular, very famous, just a huge box office draw, but unknown to virtually everybody at the time. She had a scientific mind. She was brilliant. IQ 154. When you consider the average is between 85 and 110, she was brilliant. Her hobby, inventing things, and one of the inventions she came up with changed our lives today in a big way. In the 1940s, she came up with the concept of frequency hopping, and what that basically involves is you can have a number of different signals on the same frequency. If you lose contact, it hops over to a different frequency. Exactly what this gadget does here. Frequency hopping is exactly what cell phones do. Hedy Lamarr was the first one to invent it. She had a patent. That patent expired. And had it been enforced today, it's worth an estimated $30 billion. Wow. But she never made a dime off of it. Hedy Lamarr, more than just a pretty face on the big screens, and with an apology to the late Paul Harvey, now you know the rest of the story.
That's very interesting. Lamarr, I think I'm going to have to read on it. Frequency hopping. Okay, let's move on to Myla. Myla, who's your woman of history?
So Ace, I'm not really into U.S. history because I wasn't born here in the U.S. I didn't go to school here in the U.S. But there's a movie I saw a couple of months ago in Netflix. It's about Amelia. It's about Amelia Earhart, and the movie is called Amelia, starring Hilary Swank. And she is known as the first female aviator who flies solo across the Atlantic Ocean. And I was really amazed with her accomplishments, her courage and her resilience. It's truly, truly inspiring that being a female is not a hindrance for her to achieve her goals. And I remember when I was started working, because I work in IT, which mostly is a job. When I started working, it was really, it was in the 1990s, and most of the people I work with are men. So like I'm in the midst of a profession that mostly are men, and it's really challenging. So I really feel, of course, in the 1930s, during the time that Amelia did all her accomplishments, it was probably really challenging for her as well. So it's truly she's a truly inspiring person. Ace?
Amelia Earhart. I've read about her a little bit, and there are also conspiracy theories about her whereabouts right now or where she landed. But that's for another day, another discussion. Let's go to Rani. Rani, share with us your woman of history.
So I'm going to go with Kamala Harris, the new Vice President of the United States. She was the first Black woman to be elected in the vice presidency, and also the first South Asian to be elected in the vice presidency. But she was also in 2016 the first South Asian to be elected to the U.S. Senate, but she was actually the second Black woman elected to the U.S. Senate. The first Black woman elected to the U.S. Senate was back in 1928. Minnie Buckingham Harper was elected to the U.S. Senate back then. But these are great milestones for women in the U.S. Back to you guys.
Hats off to Kamala Harris. Let's move on to May Ann. May Ann, share with us, who's your woman of history?
Well, Ace, I would say Hillary Clinton, because I have a thing for lawyers. And also because she's part of such an amazing and memorable college experience that I had in my last year in college. She visited Manila, Philippines in 2009, and she met with selected student leaders in the Philippines, and I was lucky enough to be chosen as one of the representatives of my university. So the process of meeting her itself was quite memorable. The very early call time, the very heavy security around University of Santo Tomas, because that was the venue. And just to remember, just imagine how giddy we were, because we're like college Filipino students meeting one of the most powerful women in the world. Ace?
I see. Thanks for sharing that, May Ann. Eli, who's your woman of history?
So I wanted to highlight Ella Fitzgerald. She was actually the first Black woman to win a Grammy. And then, that kind of paved... So that happened in 1958. She won 2 Grammys that night, actually. It was for Best Female Vocal Performance on an Album, and also Best Vocal Performance on a Jazz Song. So she just kind of paved the way, especially from that point on, for more women of color to be recognized in the music industry for their talents and their contributions.
Thank you, Eli. Indeed, these are notable women of history. For me, it's Helen Keller. Helen Keller, deaf, blind, mute American author, disability rights advocate, political activist, and a lecturer, deaf, blind, and mute. But who is more interesting than her is her teacher. Not much is said about Anne Sullivan. Anne Sullivan also had a disability at an early age, but she extended her care to Helen Keller. Read about it. As always, at the end of every broadcast, we do not forget to recognize the efforts of our healthcare workers, first responders, and essential workers by giving them a round of applause. Thank you for being our modern-day heroes. That is today's Eagle News America. Thank you for joining us. I'm Ace Ramirez. We live in interesting times.